Hi guys, this is Bill with Media Unlocked, and we are back in 3.0 Studios today to tell you and talk about a review of the Sigma 14-24 f2.8 art lens. Now we wanted to shoot this video down in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park with lots of trees and fall color and pretty stuff. But it didn't work. Nature did not cooperate with us this year, and we're sitting in the middle of an ice storm right now, and David wouldn't let me shoot out in the parking lot because he forgot his tripod, and it was an ugly thing. So in any case, we're shooting it in 3.0 today. But I want to tell you about this lens. Now, for starters, it is a Sigma art lens. Our friends at B&H sent it to us. I've had it for about a month, and I've had a chance to play with it, and I've given it a pretty good run for its money. Even though I'm not a real wide-angle shooter, I learned a lot with this lens, and I'm really looking forward to telling you about it. This lens is an 1,150 gram beast, pure and simple. It's heavy. It has a great build. I mean, look at this thing. It is an amazing lens. It is weatherproofed. It's got great packaging. It is safe to use outside. It is a fantastic lens. 1,150 grams. It is a heavy lens, but that just makes it an easy lens to use in many ways. So I'm going to start off by telling you about the specs, and I'm going to read that off my list here, but I apologize, I'm getting old and David's too cheap to buy me a flip chart to hide right over by the camera, so I'm going to have to look down. So in any case, it has 17 elements in 11 groups. There are 3 fluorite elements. 3 of the elements have special low dispersion coating to reduce chromatic aberration, and 3 of them are aspherical. Now what this does, like I said, it reduces the chromatic aberration and it reduces the color fringing. You're going to find out that there is less color fringing, less aberration with this lens than with any other wide-angle lens you have ever put on your camera. Pure and simple. I've seen the tests with this versus Nikon. Canon does not have a directly comparable lens. They have a 16-35, but I've shot the 16-35 and I've compared the fringing and the aberrations from the 16 that I used to this lens, and they're not even comparable. The Nikon lens is very comparable, but in all of the reviews I took a look at that were head-to-head, the Sigma beat it in all of the reviews I've seen when they looked at them head-to-head. So this lens is amazing. It has a great build. It has great weather sealing. It has the front element coating to protect against finger smudges and things like that. It is absolutely a spectacular lens. Now the angle of view goes from 114.2 degrees to 84.1 degrees. Now let's take just a second. What does that mean? One of the things that I learned as a photographer back in the old days was that 60 degrees is your usual field of vision. So anything wider than 60 degrees is a wide angle lens. Anything wider than about 85 degrees is an ultra wide angle lens. So this is definitely an ultra wide angle lens. It is fantastic. The autofocus system worked incredibly smoothly and quickly with my Canon. I used it on a Canon 5D Mark III, which is my workhorse camera, and it just worked perfectly. I had no issues at all, except in the lowest of light was the only time I had any autofocus issues at all. I'll tell you about a shoot where I had a very low light and it worked really, really well despite the low light issues. It is sharp, very sharp. Everything I've tested with this lens, the focus is just unbelievably sharp. The center focus on it is just absolutely perfect, but it's sharper on the edges than any other wide-angle lens I have ever worked with. Now, wide-angle lenses are a little bit different when you want to use them. You have to think a little bit differently in your composition. One of the biggest mistakes that people using a wide-angle lens for the first time, yeah, that was me. One of the biggest mistakes I made was that I was thinking I could just cram more stuff into the lens. It didn't work that way. Now I've got a shot here that we're popping up, and it's a shot I took out at Keeneland. Keeneland is a racetrack here in town. It's one of the most beautiful racetracks in the world. It was built in the 1830s, and they planted a sycamore tree when they were building Keeneland. And that sycamore tree is now, you know, it's huge. I've always wanted a shot of that sycamore tree, but I've never had a lens big enough to capture the entire thing. It's in the paddock. The horses walk by it. The jockeys have their colored silks on. All of the ladies with their hats and the gentlemen in their coats and ties are standing around watching the parade of horses as they go out to the race, and it's just a beautiful scene. Well, I did go out to Keeneland, and I got the sycamore tree. So the shot I'm putting up right now is a cropped version of that, and it gives you the entire paddock area at Keeneland with all of the jockeys walking across. It's really kind of a cool shot. If you're into horse racing, if you're into Keeneland, and if you're into that environment, it is something that it worked really well, and I could not have done it without this lens. I really, really appreciate Sigma for giving me this shot. So how did I use this lens? I've used it on a few shots, just learning how to down here in downtown Lexington. I'd go up to a parking garage, shoot the downtown area just to see and to get a feel for it, to learn how to use it, because I'm not much of a wide angle guy. Now, that's my bias. I learned to shoot back in the 1970s. Back in the 70s, it was film, almost always black and white. And I was a teenager. I thought, mistakenly, that the camera body was the most important thing. So I put my money into professional quality camera bodies. I unfortunately did not really put my money into professional glass. As a result, I learned that anything under 50 millimeters, stay away from it, because you get distortion, and when you did shoot color, you got aberrations that just did not look good at all. So I stayed wide, far away from wide angle lenses. In fact, that's such a bias that when I had the Canon 16-35 a while back for a video we did on that one, that I really didn't even want to shoot it when I first got it. I was so worried about the wide angle bias that I had. But I've learned a few things now since then. I've learned that when you're talking with professional level glass, and this is professional level glass, that you really don't have those issues. Combine that with Photoshop, learning some editing techniques, and you don't have that level of distortion that you had in the old days. So I need to learn to get past some of the things and unlearn some of the bad habits I learned back in the day. You know, maybe you can teach an old dog some new tricks. But in any case, I used it in downtown just to shoot, just to learn how to use it. But I used it in two major, well, for me, major shoots. Number one, I wanted to go to the Great Smoky Mountain National Park down in eastern Tennessee and western North Carolina and shoot the mountains and the fall colors, but nature didn't cooperate this year. The fall colors hit, a rainstorm came in, heavy winds, and the fall colors left almost immediately. A friend of mine who went down for an advanced scouting trip, however, he gave me a call and said that the border area between Tennessee and Kentucky really had some interesting color. It wasn't really well developed at the time, but it was okay. So I went down to the Big South Fork National River Recreation Area, which is the Cumberland River. It is the way that the frontier settlers back in the 1700s, I guess, moved west from Virginia into the area of exploring that we now know as Kentucky. It was the Cumberland Gap area that everybody talks about, and how Daniel Boone came over. And in fact, I probably stepped in some of his old footprints when I was down there roaming around with this lens. It's a beautiful area. It's a little difficult to get to because it's not located quickly relative to any interstates or things like that. So you have to kind of get there as a destination. But it is a great area. It has Yahoo Falls, it has arches, it has the Cumberland River, which is a beautiful thing to photograph. So that was one shoot that I did with it, and I did manage to catch some fall color down there, and I used this on the overlooks looking over the Cumberland River. And I'm going to pop up a couple of images right now that I've shot with this lens. Now, if you take a look at these images, you'll discover that, unfortunately, I was still learning how to use it, so they're not the greatest quality image, but they do show you the capabilities of the lens. The first images that I'm throwing up here are of the Cumberland River from the Devil's Jump overlook, which is really cool, and I wanted to go down there and shoot stars with it later, but nature did not cooperate with me. At any case, I also am throwing up some images of the Big South Fork Recreation Area sign that you see when you come in. Now, I shot this at 14 millimeters and I shot it at 24 millimeters, just so you would get a feel for what the two of them look like side by side. Also, I was testing for the vignetting and the aberrations. So take a look at those images again and take a look for yourself about the vignetting. Yes, there was a little bit. There always will be in an extreme wide angle lens. And for some of the aberration. Look at the sharpness on the side. We're going to pop those images in so that you can take a look at home on your computer screen and give you a better idea of what they look like. My second major shoot with this lens was a couple of days ago. I wanted to go, and I've always wanted to shoot some of the beautiful cathedrals and the architectural features. So I went to Covington, Kentucky, and I shot the Cathedral of the Blessed Assumption, which is one of the oldest churches in Kentucky, and it is gorgeous. The scroll work, the arches, they are absolutely beautiful. And I shot this lens inside on a tripod using long exposure techniques and bracketing techniques so that I could correct for light issues. Because if you've ever shot inside of a church, it is dim, it is dark. And I really wanted to capture the detail in the stained glass because their glass is absolutely beautiful. But again, I wanted to capture the arches and the beautiful woodwork. I love shooting reflections, so my favorite shot was this one, which is the reflection of the light coming through the stained glass and then reflecting off of the black piano that they use for their services. It was a beautiful shoot. I really enjoyed it. It was one of my first true architectural shoots. Now, when I used this lens, I used it on a tripod. That was in the church, that was in Big South Fork, because it is really a tripod lens. It is 1,150 grams. If you combine that with the weight of your camera, again, I'm using a 5D Mark III, you've got a heavy rig. And the tripod makes it a lot easier to deal with. And that brings me to one of the things I did not like about the lens. It does not have an image stabilization system. Now, image stabilizing systems in $1,200 lenses, some have it, some don't. It's one of the ways that they cut some of the price off to make the lens a little bit cheaper. And like I said, this is a tripod lens. You turn your image stabilizers off when you shoot on a tripod because they can actually create a little bit of camera shake if you don't. So in this lens, the lack of an image stabilizer, it's more of a problem in my head than it is in reality because I doubt I would ever use this lens handheld. Now David's going to come in a little bit and tell you how he did use it handheld. So that's, I'm going to leave for him. But again, on a tripod, you turn the IS systems off, so it's not that huge of a lack, and this is definitely a tripod lens. It's hard to use this lens without a tripod. That was one of the things I found difficult about this. The other thing that I really didn't like is related to the fact that it is an ultra wide angle lens. If you take a look at the front, you'll notice the curvature of the front lens. I'm going to pop this out so that you can see it a little bit better and give you an idea of how curved this is. What this means is that you cannot put a normal filter kit on the front. There's just no way. Nisi makes a filter kit that slides right over this hood that allows you to use neutral density filters or polarizer filters. They're 150 millimeters square, so it is a very kind of large, odd size because this thing is a beast. You got to look at the size here. But it's $450, and that is a lot of money for a filter kit for one lens. Now, they do make a gel kit holder that you can put on the back of this. It requires a minor adaptation. You can pop it on there. I think it would work, but to be totally honest with you, I didn't have a chance to try it. I don't have the capability of setting it up, and it doesn't fit with the neutral density filters that I use on a regular basis. Now, as a landscape photographer, that's an issue for me, and I need to investigate that better, and hopefully I'll get a chance to do so and get back with you guys after I get a chance to do that. So, moral of the story is the only two things I didn't like about the lens are the lack of an image stabilizer and the filter issue. But both of those are something that you can deal with. Now, David used the lens just a little bit differently than I did. He shot a wedding with it for both video and stills. He did use it on a tripod, but I think he did a few images handheld, even though it was, again, a very heavy lens. So we're going to let David get on right now, and I'm going to let him tell you how he used it.
Well, thanks for the introduction there, Bill. So I want to talk a little bit about how I use the lens for video. I did use it a little bit for photography. The one photography project I really used it for was for a corporate client and shooting the warehouse that their employees are working in and some of the stuff that they had in their warehouse. Unfortunately, I can't show those pictures to you guys. But it was really nice being able to get a very wide angle shot, or still at 24, a still pretty wide shot of getting all their employees working at once, which is really nice. Now, for video, I used it for a couple different weddings. Now, as Bill mentioned, you really want to keep this lens on a tripod. So I didn't throw it on the gimbal. We use the Crane 2, and I usually use the 28mm or our 14mm, but we really didn't want to put this on the Crane 1. This is an extremely heavy lens. So it is something that would get really tiring on my arms if I was carrying it all day on the Crane. So it works great for wide angle shots, especially with that f2.8. So what I mostly did is, like for the father-daughter dance, I would put it at 14 millimeters and get the whole entire dance floor as well as the attendees to the wedding, which was really great. And if I wanted to just get the dance floor and a few of the attendees to the wedding, then I would zoom in to 24 millimeters, still giving me that f2.8. Now, we all know, for people that shoot wedding video, that anything that isn't at least 2.8 or faster, you're going to have an issue with light 9 times out of 10. Thankfully, we shoot on the Sony a7 III and the Sony a7R III. So I believe I had my ISO pumped up to probably 3,000 or 4,000, and it still looked fairly clean. There's a little bit of noise. I'm gonna pop up a little bit of the video that we used so you could actually see what it looks like. For me, as a wedding videographer, I found that it worked great as a secondary lens. So I had my primary camera and lens set up on the gimbal, the Crane 2, while having this sit on the tripod, and I would just literally just move the tripod as needed throughout the day. If we were in one big room, of course, I broke it down anytime we were moving to another section or another area or another part of the day. So I really found it to be very useful in that aspect, and it was really nice that it was an f2.8 lens and giving me that wide angle shot. Now, I didn't use it a ton, but when I did use it, it worked great for what it did. Anyways, I was really happy with the lens at a $1,200 price tag. It is a little bit pricey unless you have a very specific reason or need for it. This is not something I would go out and buy just for wedding videography. Now, if I already had all the lenses I needed and I wanted to start collecting those weird one-off lenses that you don't use very often but you still want, this would be definitely one of them.
It would make a nice Christmas present for Bill.
And of course, Bill's always trying to get stuff out of me when he doesn't reciprocate at all. He wants me to buy him all the stuff, but doesn't want to give me anything.
Because you're in charge.
Oh, apparently me being the boss man.
Okay, so I'm back and I wanted to give you the final conclusions that we have about the Sigma Art 14-24. First off, as you can tell, I love this lens. I am a fan of Sigma. I think Sigma delivers a superior product for a price that undercuts the name brands, Canon or Nikon, and I think that the product is at least as good, if not better, in some respects. Certainly, this is better than anything Canon's got. They don't have a 14mm lens, and the 16-35 that Canon had is a fantastic lens. I love it. The 2.8 is amazing. This is a 2.8, it's 14-24, and sometimes that extra 2mm is an important deal. If you need that 2mm, this is definitely the way to go. I would buy this lens in a heartbeat at $1,200. This is just a great lens for the price. I couldn't test it against Nikon because I'm a Canon guy, but in all of the reviews I took a look at, this lens stacks up as good as or better than the Nikon 14mm zoom as well. So seriously, this is a lens you want to put in your bag because it's just a great lens. I am a fan of the Sigma Art series. I will purchase a Sigma Art lens in a heartbeat. I've got the 50, I want the 85, I want the 105. This is the first time I've taken a look at a Sigma zoom, and to be totally honest with you, I'm a fan. They win me. The image stabilizer, the filters, something I can deal with, but I'll tell you, I just absolutely love this lens. It's got some flaws, like everything else, but you ought to take a look at it. So take a look at this bag, rent it at your local camera shop, try it out. If you are a wide angle landscape photographer, this is a lens you should seriously consider. So again, thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you in a bit.
You guys have made it this far. If you want to check out our newest video, it will be right here. If you want to check out the product, it will be down here. If you do happen to click on it and purchase it, it does give us a little bit of commission, and that helps me a lot keep making these videos. And of course, guys, right down below, go and leave a comment, hit that subscribe button, follow along. We'll catch you next time.